Hello everybody, welcome back to another Pandora Hearts manga discussion, this one on volume number 17. If you're new to this series, this video is full of spoilers for this volume and any previous volumes. The second part of this series is that I do these videos before I read ahead, so I'm just theorizing because I really don't have any idea what's going to happen beyond this volume. So let's get right into it, and I'm going to try and do the same thing I did in my last video, which was instead of trying to summarize each individual event, I just kind of want to talk about the bigger ideas and the bigger reveals. So this volume hinges very much on the relationship between Jack and Lacey. There's still a ton of questions that aren't answered in this volume, but really at this point what we find out, the main sort of thrust of this is we find out about Jack and Lacey's relationship, how it started, how it grew, how it developed. We find out the origin of Alice and the intention of the Abyss. And we finally are told sort of, what Oz is. So let's hit a few things that I think are important to mention right off the bat. So the first thing that we find out is that Lacey is indeed a Baskerville. Now, the thing that I found interesting about this is that when she and Jack are interacting and then they get attacked by those thugs, she uses her chain to destroy them. Now, she has a chain, and I know that isn't really odd for a Baskerville, but it is odd given her situation within the Baskervilles. As we're eventually later informed, right from the moment that Lacey has arrived at the Baskervilles, she has been destined to be sacrificed to the Abyss. We finally find out that this whole children of ill omen thing with the red eyes, there seems to be a cause. No, they don't say it's the only cause, but there is sort of a cause, and we find out what sort of the issue is about them. So we find out that basically Glens and those who will become Glen are kind of imbued with the Abyss from the start, and that because of their power and because of their connection to the Abyss, they can cause distortions around them, and that it is often that a child of ill omen is born as a sibling to a future Glen, and they are considered a distortion of that future Glen's power. And the children of ill omen, for whatever reason, are able to access the Abyss to its deepest levels, which are supposed to be the sole power of Glen, the sole, responsibility of Glen. And even then, he's only to do it in the most dire of circumstances. And I find this kind of interesting then, that you would have a girl that you knew was going to be sacrificed right from the start, and you would give her a chain. Because the Baskervilles, from what we have seen, they're inducted into the Baskervilles just because of their exposure to the light of the Abyss, thus glowing orbs and stuff. But that doesn't automatically grant them a chain. They still have to enter into a contract with it. I mean, that certainly seems to be what we're seeing. I mean, we know that Vincent was a Baskerville, and he's only got the 2 chains, both of which one he entered into a legal contract with and one he entered into an illegal contract with. Same thing with Gil. Gil doesn't have any chains other than Raven, which we know he entered into a legal contract with many years after the fact that he was a Baskerville. So being a Baskerville doesn't naturally give you a chain. So why the heck would they have given Alice a chain, Lacey, sorry. Why would they have given Lacey a chain if they knew that she was going to be sacrificed? We meet that old crone who was the one that we saw a number of volumes ago that implanted the idea in Gil's head to destroy any who threatened his master. And we find out that this is Jury, the lurker, or whatever, this old woman who, she is a Baskerville, but as opposed to the other Baskervilles whose main purpose is to maintain the Abyss and to eliminate any distortions of the Abyss, she is there to oversee Glen. And we don't really get a full filling in about who she is and what she is, but it seems pretty clear that her main goal is to protect Glenn and to maintain the integrity of the Baskerville house. Now, you have this girl, these children of ill omen, that can sidestep the power of Glenn and access the things that only he is supposed to have access to. And they treat this as a distortion of Glenn, and therefore, as Glenn, as the head of the Baskervilles, the ones who must destroy distortions, it falls to Glenn to destroy his own sibling because she or he is a distortion. Now, this seems pretty cold, and I don't really get at this point why that's so important, other than to maintain just some level of hierarchy, right? Like, it isn't clear to me why it's so dangerous that Lacey can access the abyss, especially when they're allowing her to go into the abyss. She even says to Glenn, like not the Glenn we know very well, but the Glenn before him, his predecessor, Levi Glenn, I'll call him. She says to Levi Glenn, like, you know, there is someone in the abyss. I couldn't see them, but I knew that they were there. And he is sort of like, you know, you shouldn't be going in there without permission, blah, blah, blah. You shouldn't wander around. But they are letting her go in. Even though they keep her locked in a tower, even though they seem to keep her for the most part to make her life separate from the rest of the Baskervilles, she's still given the privileges of a Baskerville in terms of being able to travel into the abyss and having a chain. I just find that odd. And I think that seems that to me that's a bit contradictory and counterintuitive to whatever the Baskervilles are doing. That said, we also have Jack, who's this interesting character because he is sort of the same idea, right? You can see where he and Lacey have this connection because they're both, because of their own circumstances, these children that are meant to be discarded. Lacey is ultimately to be the sacrifice for her brother to take his final step to become Glenn. Jack is a love child of a Vesalius Duke, or I'm not sure if he was the Duke, but you know, he's the love child of the Vesalius house. And his mother and he have basically been ignored and cast aside to the point where his mother goes mad and he ends up on the street alone with nothing. And so we have both of these kids that essentially are being sacrificed for things that are pretty much beyond their control. It's only because of how they were born that marks them as being unworthy and that they have to be cast aside. And their relationship is one where we see in Jack, he learns from Lacey this desire to live, that he basically says he didn't care about existing, he doesn't care about being in the world. The only reason that he learns to stay in the world and the only reason that he learns all of these skills to struggle and I guess eventually win his way into the favor of his father and the Vesalius house is because of Lacey and because of this sort of fire that she lights within him. And for Lacey, I mean, we're not too sure, right? Like, Levi Glenn kind of says that she's very fickle, that often when she runs away, she finds these playthings. He even says to her, you know, oh, even you can fall for a faithful dog who will follow you for 8 years, in reference to Jack. But you can see that there's something different about that there's something different in her and the way that she feels about Jack. And I almost wonder if that's part of the reason why she gives in to Levi Glenn's experiment, where he basically says, you know, he's going to impregnate her, which I was kind of like a little weirded out by that, impregnate, the way that he says that. I'm kind of like, dude, you didn't want to do any experiment. You just wanted to mac on a cute girl, you sick perv. But I mean, you know, whatever. So his idea is that he knows she's going to be taken into the abyss. But he says because her unborn child is without sin, which, I mean, again, there's this whole idea of sin. I mean, the Baskervilles are basically the ones that are proclaiming that you have sin. I mean, that's what even, you know, Oswald, who is Lacey's brother, Oswald Glenn, that's what he says to Lacey, that, you know, he proclaims that she has a sin, and that's why she's going to be dragged into the abyss. And we saw the same thing with Oz, right? Your sin is your very existence. And so I don't know how that works, that they have this connection where it's like the Baskervilles are able to pass judgment on someone, and therefore from that point on they're marked. But because Oswald Glenn marks Lacey as having this sin, she is taken into the abyss. But because he didn't mark her child as being sinful, because he didn't know about it, the child survives in the abyss, even though Lacey herself is basically disintegrated. Levi Glenn's idea is that the child will survive and that the child will mature, and because time, and I discussed this earlier, how, this whole idea how Lacey could have been around Jack's age and given birth in the abyss, and the child could have grown and aged because of the sort of time in the abyss being all willy, winky-wonky, and that she would have come out, and that seems to be exactly what happened. So, however, much to Levi Glenn's surprise, she has twins. And his whole plan, like, he tries to explain it to Jack, and I mean, there's a lot of blah, 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 which basically what I got out of that is that him saying basically, I think the way the Baskervilles do things is crap, and I want to throw a hornet's nest right into the middle of it. I want to stir some crap and some chaos, and I want to see what happens. And his idea is that if Lacey can give birth to a child within the abyss, that it may become the vessel for this core of the abyss. And eventually, yes, it does. It becomes the intention. And then we have the twin, which is spit out, that becomes Alice. I thought it was really weird, though, that Levi would enlist Jack to oversee the end of his experiment. I mean, I know that Levi's going to die because his body's falling apart and he's handed off his powers to Oswald Glenn. But I kind of got the impression that it was almost like an apology to Jack, that because Alice was so much like Lacey, that he was giving Jack that chance to see her and to interact with her as like an apology for the fact that he took Lacey away. I'm not too sure how that sort of works out, but obviously there was some affection for Jack, and there was a reason that he trusted Jack with that information that he kept from all the other Baskervilles. In fact, Jack even realizes that he's got to play stupid in front of Oswald, because even though we're seeing evidence that what Glenn said in the previous visions was true, that even though you inherit the powers of the Glens and a lot of the knowledge of the Glens, you're still your own person, because Oswald as Glenn is still pretty much Oswald. He's still most definitely not what Levi was as Glenn. And so Levi entrusts this with Jack, and Jack realizes, like, I've got to keep this from Glenn. And so now we see where the mask has developed with Jack, right? And this whole mask that he has, that he's fooled us for like 16 volumes with, was all basically created because of Lacey. And his desire to be with Lacey again and see Lacey again. And even Oswald makes the comment that Jack is like a clear body of water, and that when he looks into him, he can't really see anything beyond his own reflection looking back at him, that he can't see into beyond the surface of Jack. And this seems to be a talent that Jack has, and when Jack realizes that truly Oswald Glenn knows nothing of Levi's plan and doesn't really know who or what Alice is, Jack, you can see the mask drop over him, that it's like, I'm playing the idiot. I'm playing just the stupid friend who doesn't care, isn't going to ask questions, just as long as he can be close to Lacey in some way, even if that isn't Lacey, even if she just looks like Lacey. But in addition to finding out the identity of the old crone who programmed Gil, We also find out more about the identity of the woman who programmed Vincent. And of course, this is the Duke Barma's younger sister. And we find out that she has a connection to Jack, a connection so much that she says to him, she wants him to bring her Oswald's head. And we see skulls on her shelf and a decapitated body on the table behind her. And we know that there's sort of this hint of witchcraft, obviously. And I'm getting the impression that Barma's diary is going to reveal that it wasn't him that had anything to do with the spells and stuff. I don't think really he had the magic. I think it was all the younger sister. And I don't think even he really knew what she was doing until it was already done. And that's why his diary is a confession, right? Because it's basically, I allowed her to get away with this. This is me theorizing because I don't know yet. We won't know until I maybe read the next issue. I'm kind of hoping we get more answers because there's so many questions here. Because the younger Barma, she says, to Jack, how many times have I rescued you? And so I almost kind of think that even though we're initially led to believe that Jack kind of earned his favor into the Vesalius house, I almost wonder if she somehow manipulated things. If she somehow saw to it that Jack was taken back into the Vesalius house. I'm sure that will probably be addressed. And in some ways, I almost wonder if she's kind of the villain of this. I mean, obviously, we know that Jack is manipulating things and has been manipulating things in order to get Lacy. And it's made very clear by Jack that he'll do damn near anything to get Lacy back. So he's an obvious villain, but does he actually have the power and the knowledge to make that happen? Not necessarily, but apparently the younger sister Barma does. Now, we could talk about all sorts of stuff, and like these volumes, they're crazy. They're so much filled with so much stuff, and I always forget things because there's so much in them. I almost feel like I should go frame by frame, but it would take forever. But we need to talk about Oz, and we need to talk about Jack kind of revealing the true nature of Sablier. And from what I can gather, so he refers to the bee rabbit as Oz. And it appears that it's the bee rabbit that's been doing all the slaughter of the individuals, and it's a lot of the Baskervilles. And Glenn makes this comment to him. He's like, I see you've used that chain to sever the chains. And I wasn't too sure how to interpret that statement. When he said it, I almost thought to myself, is that why Glenn lost all of his chains? Like how the other houses ended up with those chains. And Jack says he's going to show Oz the truth. And we already know that Cheshire was a true kitten that was belonging to Alice. But it was the intention Alice, not Alice, loud and raucous Alice. We see her with a toy stuffed bunny that she calls Oz. And that she basically is treating this toy rabbit as her knight that will save her and protect her. And we know that Oz has had those feelings and that most often his powers have erupted in response to saving and protecting Alice. And so I wasn't too sure, though, when I saw that. I was like, now, which Alice is that? Is that Alice, loudmouth, I love meat Alice? Or is that Intention of the Abyss Alice? And I'm guessing it's the Intention of the Abyss, because how else would that rabbit become a chain? It seems to me that the chains are all a result of the dollies and the toys and the things that were closest to the Intention of the Abyss. that she was the one who powered them. But then that would also mean that how did Jack get the bee rabbit? What relationship did he develop with Alice, either one of them, that allowed him to have access to it? I mean, did he tell the intention? Did she gift the bee rabbit to him as his chain? I don't know at this point, but it obviously there had to be some intervention there. There had to be some interaction, because you can't just go from being a stuffed bunny that's loved by the intention of the abyss to being this crazy, uber powerful chain. And we do find out that even Jack says he was waiting for the in-cues on Oz to continue further because it would increase the powers of the bee rabbit. And when Oz tries to protest and say, I'm not the bee rabbit, Alice is, that's left sort of hanging. And Jack makes again the statement about Alice affirming her existence. And again, this is kind of going to what I said before, where I almost wondered if somehow Oz had conjured Alice. And it's almost, okay, I'm going to try and word this out that it won't sound completely asinine, but there's often a thing, and I mean, I'm probably not going to get the word exactly, but in psychology, they talk about how we reflect things. So we can't face the fact that we have a certain idea or that we've committed a certain action, and so we push it onto someone or something else. We've already seen this in Pandora Hearts with the whole thing with the headhunter and with Elliot. Elliot couldn't face the reality of what he had done, and so he pushed all of that guilt and all of those feelings and all of that responsibility onto this phantom headhunter. And so he projected his own terribleness onto something else. And in this way, I almost wonder if that's kind of what Oz has done. He's kind of projected his own power onto something else that became Alice. And that's why, as his power gets stronger and his need for her becomes less, why she went sort of transparent when Echo was fighting her in the last volume. Because as he becomes more into his own, he needs that reflection, that he needs that less, right? So when he says, oh, she affirmed her existence, I don't know how that's going to play into things, but that, that the projection, because she becomes a strong enough will, that, she becomes her own person, or is it because there was an element of a recognition of the bee rabbit that it kind of conjured the essence of Alice, because we know she's dead. I really don't know. Like I said, there's so many things that are still questions. And how did a chain, the bee rabbit, become an infant Oz? And well, it just goes on and on. And like I said, every time I think we've got more answers, we get new and maybe even more difficult questions. And I'm going to end it there. I kind of wonder how much Barma, how much she is, the Duchess Barma, how much she is manipulating things behind the scenes. And if we're going to find out that she still figures in all of this. Like I said, as much as Jack seems like the villain, it still strikes me that he doesn't have the ability to pull this off. Not the way that she seems to, not with her knowledge that she seems to have. So we'll see how that all plays out. I'm going to end this video right now and run and read the next volume, because it's killing me waiting for this. So again, like, some of the stuff I kind of saw coming, but to the full extent, like, Oz is a stuffed bunny? Like, what? Anyway, so thank you so much for watching the video. I will be back next week with volume number 18, getting close towards the end. Thank you again for watching. I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Until then, Bye bye for now.